the actual order of Georgia, Michigan, TCU, and USC seems 100% fair. Ohio State ahead of Alabama, fair in the loss column, fair in the resume column too.
Losses are part of your resume. You've only got half as many. And you've got, like, Ohio State also has its win over Penn State, which is number 8. Alabama's best win is number 20, Texas.
Yeah, Alabama's wins are not good. They only have
No.
quality losses.
This is my thing. I'm happy that the committee put Alabama at 6 because I did think they might put them at 5 just for like drama purposes heading into the final week. But my problem with the committee in Alabama all season long has been that Alabama has been getting treated like it's 2020 Alabama, when this has clearly not been one of the better Alabama teams of the last decade. Like, it's still one of the 10 best teams in the country, and I'm never going to argue anything differently. But like, it was getting treated like it's number 1 Alabama. Like, beating Alabama is like beating the number 1 team, even though it has not been anywhere near as good as it has been in recent years. It's not even as good as last year's team. And last year we were talking about how it's not that great of a team compared to previous Alabama teams.
If you're new to the conversation, by the way, quality loss is something that we have heard committee members say in the past. We are saying that a little bit tongue in cheek as we are providing our own actual analysis, but it goes a little something like this, where you're like, how good is Alabama? It's like, well, they've beaten everybody on their schedule, but they only lost by a field goal to a team that the committee says is the 7th best team in the country, and that was on the road. And they only lost by a 2-point conversion to a team that the committee says is the 14th best team, and that was on the road. So you got to understand road environment, close losses. You know, if they took care of business everywhere else, they're a good team. I don't agree with using that as a resume descriptor to argue for why they are great. I think the argument for Alabama being really good is probably stronger on the statistical side, where, like you have mentioned, Tom, I know that you've kept your own like ratings and rankings for a long time. This is not one of the best Alabama teams in a very long time, but like you just said, it is still one of the better teams in the country. They are good on offense. They are good on defense. And if you are looking at a sheet full of statistics where everything's going to tell you X out of 131, where you rank in all these different categories, then Alabama does check out as a very, very good team across the board.
Correct. Alabama is a very good team. It's just not the Alabama team that we are accustomed to. And like you said, I've been doing my own power ratings for 7 seasons now. This is easily the lowest rated Alabama team I've had. But I also want to mention, like you talked about those resume losses. If you're going to play that game saying, well, they lost really close on the road to LSU and they lost really close on the road to Tennessee, you have to point out that they needed a field goal with 10 seconds left to beat Texas. And you also have to point out that Texas A&M had a chance to beat them on the very final play of that game. So if the close losses count, you have to consider the close wins. They kind of cancel each other out. This has not been a dominant Alabama team by any stretch.
You really would not like to see this Alabama team in the college football.
No, I'm going to get labeled by Alabama fans as an SEC hater or an Alabama hater, but I think every Alabama fan knows deep down in their heart this Alabama team doesn't deserve to be in the college football playoff. If you throw them in there, they're not going to tear it down, but they don't deserve to be there. I don't think anybody with a rational mind believes that's the case.
So what about Ohio State? Because Ohio State, prior to this Saturday, was the number 2 team in the country, number 2 teams in the college football playoff rankings, and deserved at the moment to have a shot to compete for a national championship. They now sit outside of the top 4. If someone slips up, Ohio State is the next one in. Mm-hmm. How differently do you feel about the Buckeyes after the result from Saturday?
I feel like it's one of the better teams in the country and that it's still capable of winning a national title. I think that if the team plays its best game, there isn't a team in the country it can't beat. It's just we haven't seen Ohio State play its best game this year. I feel like they've had great games where they've dominated, but I never watched this team at any point this year and thought that was just a dominant performance from start to finish. They kind of have lulls over the course of 60 minutes, but I think that's the case with every team in the country this year. So I can't really hold that against them. My problem is, and the one thing I've always had with the way that the system works, just on how they do it, Ohio State loses a game. So it gets to stay at home this weekend. And this was like the argument we had with Tennessee. Like when Tennessee lost to Georgia, we're like, well, what if this is good for them? Because that means they don't have to play in the SEC championship. And at the time, we thought they'd probably be playing Alabama. And it's like, do they want the rematch? Alabama's second crack at them. But Ohio State benefits by not having to play this weekend, whereas TCU, which has already beaten Kansas State, if they lose to Kansas State, some people will think Ohio State deserves a spot over them. If USC loses to Utah, people will say that Ohio State deserves to be in over them. And they probably, you know what, I honestly think if USC loses, Ohio State's going to get in. But is that really fair that USC had to play an extra game and it lost it? So it loses its spot in the top 4 while Ohio State didn't have to play that game. So they get the benefit of not having to play. I don't think it's fair, but the argument will be USC has 2 losses, which I will completely understand. But like I just said, they had to play 1 extra game too. So I think in a fair world, the 4 teams that are in right now should be the 4 teams in the playoff. I think that Ohio State had its shot. It blew it. Alabama had shots. It blew it. Tennessee had shots. It blew it. So on down the line. I think winning your conference, if you're going to force them to play a championship game, that should mean something if as far as USC is concerned. Like they beat UCLA. They've been the best team in the Pac-12. If they avenge their loss against Utah, they're obviously in. It's just, I don't know. It's going to be annoying to me. Like I predicted in the preseason that both Michigan and Ohio State would be undefeated when they played and that both teams would still end up in the playoff. That could still be the case. It's just I don't think that probably should be the case at this point. If Ohio State had lost close and it had been like we talked about with Alabama winning on a last second field goal or losing close to Tennessee and LSU, then I think there'd be a decent argument. But with the way Ohio State lost that game at home against a team that was without its best player on offense, you blew your shot, man. That's the way I see it.
They got dunked on.
Mm-hmm.
Like they got yeah, I mean I'm getting in trouble for all these basketball analogies, but like those people are pointing to those long touchdown runs as though they were anomaly plays that we should ignore. And I'm kind of on the other side that in the style of competition, both in terms of your mental, like how checked in you are to a game, how much you care about winning, like when you allow those long explosive plays, like you're behind. Like you are just getting run out of your own building. That is the kind of stuff that Michigan, we already said that. That's the kind of stuff Michigan does to the worst teams in the Big Ten. And it's the way that it made Ohio State look. That said, Ohio State has also looked awesome at times this season. And I understand them being the next one up. If USC loses to Utah and Ohio State makes the college football playoff, that makes sense.